Welcome to Adventures in Acrylic. This is my first video class and I have a few participants here. We're kind of limited because we're being mindful of the coronavirus. Don't have too much group contact. So this is a new thing. So anyway, I'm going to be doing some fun things with acrylics, some different ways to paint, painting with things other than brushes. It's going to be a really fun kind of exploratory class. So when you're painting, just think about being a scientist or an explorer and doing experiments just to see what happens. So try all kinds of things that you want just to see what happens, see what the paint does, see what kind of textures you get. This is about having fun. It's not about being super careful and making it look exactly like you expect it to look. We want to be surprised, okay? We're going to create surprises. And so what, I'm going to start out working on paper, and this is watercolor paper. It's 140 pound. And when you use acrylics, you want to have a gesso foundation so that the paint doesn't sink into the paper and you end up using a lot of paint in it and it won't move. So I use gesso, and people that paint on canvas are familiar with putting a coat of gesso down first, and so a lot of times I would use like palette knife, or I like to just use, rather than a brush, I just use a little piece of cardboard that I've cut, just mat board, or you could use an old credit card or something you got in the mail that you don't need. They work really great because they help spread the paint around a lot faster than a brush, and you can get different textures. So I'm going to just go ahead and put some gesso down. And I've got plastic down so I don't need a palette, but if you want to use a plate or something for your paints, that's fine. Being plain white, I'm going to go ahead and mix some color into my paint, okay, so that I can do color at the same time that I do the gesso. And then I just start spreading that out here. Look at, isn't that beautiful? You can see all kinds of way the color mixes, and it's not just a boring color that way. Use this to spread. See, I can get all kinds of textures. So much faster than using a brush. So if you guys want to use any of these cards to spread your paint, you're welcome to try using a card too to spread it. And this one, while that one's drawing, so I like to do two at a time. So I'm going to start. While it's still wet, if you want to like just put in some other colors too, just to see what happens, you can you've got a few minutes. When it starts getting sticky, then you want to stop. But as long as it's still wet, you can put some other colors in and spread them around. And you can make squiggles, like that. See what happens when you move it different ways. See how it's making squiggles? See that? It's making funny squiggles. Wow. Nice, yeah. So you can get all kinds of textures. And this will take a few minutes to dry before you put the next coat on. So when you get it to where you just kind of want to stop, you can let that dry. And I'm gonna do two, because that way, if I'm working on one and it needs to dry, then I can start working on this one while that one's drying. So I like to do two at a time. So I'm gonna just go ahead and do a second one here. I'm going to try using some different colors. You can even squeeze your ink right on your canvas or your paper if you want to. And start spreading it around.
Yeah. Can you give me the sheet?
Can I help you do that? Will that be okay?
Yeah.
Where would you like? You want another color too? Ooh, that's for you. Oh my goodness. Just see what happens, and if you don't like the paint that you added, you can scrape it off a little bit and you can add something else over it. So this is just playtime. Just see what happens. Experiment and be daring. Sure. Alright, be daring. And I do want to say something about paper towels. I love these Viva towels because they're really strong and I can get them wet. And I can use them to do things like a paintbrush. I can use, and see, you can use them like a paintbrush. You can draw with them. You can smudge to make blends with them. They're really nice for blending. You just dampen them and then you can blend with them. If you want, that's what I'm going to do on mine. I'm going to just turn the hairdryer on a little bit. It's dry in a couple places, but it's still tacky in a few places. So I just don't want it to be sticky. So you just want to make sure you're moving your hairdryer around when you use it. And this is a pretty weak one. It's not a real, if you have a fancier big one, put it on low, just because you want it to dry gradually. You don't want just the top skin to dry and then it to be sticky and then
I want the black four.
oh, the black one. Yeah.
And I want this black.
Yeah.
That looks like a silly hair.
Yeah, it is. But see, when you drag it through the paint, it can make marks. Think about what marks it can make. Okay?
And I want this pen.
But I like to use a whole different color, so I'll see some contrast. I'll see this color poking through and I'll see another color on top. So you might want to pick just another color that looks really different. Okay? I'm going to put some paint down. It's a different color. But look at, I can do these things.
Ooh.
Look at what I can do. I can make patterns. See?
Well, what does that do?
This one?
Yeah.
Let's see. Ooh, look. Makes little tiny lines. See that?
Let's see what this one can do.
Okay, let me get some more paint on here. Let's see what this one is. Ooh. And there's also like sponges.
Ooh, let's see what they do.
Little sponges, you want to squeeze the water out and get a little bit of paint on them. And then just like that. And look at how it makes, see how it makes that texture? See how it looks kind of fuzzy?
Yeah.
Okay. So now with your dry painting, if you have it dry, or you can do this on a plain one too, if there's some that are already gessoed. You can try using the sponge, try using these cones, and what do you think a fork will do?
Eat.
What do you think a fork will do if I use a fork? How about that? I can make lines. Or I can go like that, make squiggles. Make little circles.
Oh.
So I got all these different things, and this is really cool. You can take this stuff, this fishnet stuff, and you can put it down.
Is that from the avocado bag?
And you can go like this. Put it in one spot.
Wow.
And see, then you get little lines from the fishnet. Okay? So do you want to play with some of these things and see what you can make up with them?
Yeah,
You want to play with some of these? Here, we'll put you. When I'm flicking paint, like if I want some droplets just flowing on the paint to kind of give it, sometimes I use it just to give it a cohesive feeling at the end. I'll make my paint pretty watery, so it'll flick off my brush, and I'll usually use my finger and I'll just kind of hit it against my finger so it just splatters. And if there's parts you don't want the paint to get onto, you could block them and flicker around a shape too. So you can do that. So I get paint on my bubble wrap, and then I can put it on here.
Open something new.
And what do you think's gonna happen? It does! Wow! Beautiful! More? And I just like press the end of a brush in there, and I just scratched that into it, and then I used it like a stamp, and it made these stamps. And I stamped with it. So you can make your own stamps out of like the styrofoam that comes under meat and vegetables. I'm going to switch to a brush now, and I'm actually going to make it into something. With the colors, I feel like doing some kind of fruit, so I think I'll do a pear, okay? So what I want to do is, these colors already look like the pear, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint out everything that isn't the pear, and just leave this nice textured, crazy stuff that I've done that I wouldn't normally have if I was actually just painting a pear with my brush, right? Since this is such a bright color, I'm gonna come in with some dark tones to kind of push it back. And so, let's see, I think I'll make the pear kind of be right here. This isn't a perfect pear shape, but it's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint around the pear. I'm going to paint the background. little lighter because I want my light source to kind of be coming from this side. So I'm just going to have some variation in the background. I don't like a solid color background. And if you want it really smooth, you can make it really smooth. I kind of like texture, so I like to just kind of do brush strokes in fun directions just to get an active looking background. This is a misfit one. Not the best shape.
You just brushed it with water.
Yep. Lift it off a little. Really show up. Like a little of that orange. You have to do this when it's still wet or it won't lift off, of course. And I'm just kind of making a texture back there. It's fun. Also, if you decide that there's places you don't like, say I don't like the shape of this hair, I can kind of refine it a little bit while it's still wet. I can lift off some of that. And I can blur the edges a little bit so it's not such a sharp edge outline because it's really outlined right now. So I'm going to just kind of like smudge this a little. Shape it a little bit better. And then bringing some of that background color into it too. And then what I want to kind of do is put a shadow under the pear. Purplish shadow. texture and stuff, it kind of happened. I played with it, and it just kind of like told me what to do. I didn't know this was gonna look like this when I started.
That's beautiful. I didn't
It
know
just
either.
ended
I
up
couldn't tell
here.
where it was going.
And
but
I love
it.
looking that way. It's fun, yeah.
I love it.
And then I would hang out around it, so then he would jump forward. Let me show you exactly what it is. Yeah, let's do this one. I like that. I think it's easier if you use a brush outward, but a sponge sometimes is easier to put your color around it, because you can just control it better to outline it. Painting goes through a stage where you don't like it, but just keep like playing, and pretty soon, you know, it'll just emerge in a way you didn't expect.
Do you like the fish?
Yeah.
Good. Do you add any more marks to your fish like your mom's doing with her bird? Yeah, a little more shape. Let's see, think of like three things and foggy.
So, kind of like that, the color combination of that one. That's kind of fun, whimsical. Here's the horse, where this started out just really crazy all over like this. I did scratches with the combs and everything, and then I came back in with this horse stencil that I cut out, and I just like sponged around it, painted around it so it came out, and just kind of like spread paper towels. This was a grid pattern that I sponged through, so those are some things you can do. Okay, here's one that's not finished yet. I think I'm going to speckle this one, maybe with some more golds or pinks, but it's a hummingbird with a flower, and I had everything was this color, everything was this pattern, and then I just painted the blue over to make that come out, to make that shape come out. And here's some wolves that I used a stencil for. So the original colors were these, and then I painted these over it. Make it pop out. And here's some butterflies, and these are sponged, so I've got that sponge texture in the butterflies that make them look kind of fuzzy. So that was just kind of fun playing with textures. So those are just some ideas, you know, save your bubble wrap and save your saran wrap and cut out shapes you like so that we have them all ready for when you want to explore and get your paints out. And have a great time exploring with acrylics. Have an adventure. Wow. Wow. That's flying like a butterfly all over it. Good job. Yeah. Oh.